Good morning. Good morning. Good evening. Good evening. I'm so glad to see you all. I think I've met almost everyone here, but for those of you that I haven't met, I'm Pam Franks, and I'm the director of the Williams College Museum of Art, and you're very, very kind. I am truly delighted to welcome you all as we gather together in this space at Williams College, which we respectfully acknowledge sits on the ancestral homelands of the Stockbridge-Munsee Mohicans, who are the indigenous people of the region now called Williamstown. Following tremendous hardship after being forced from their valued homelands, they continued as a sovereign tribal nation in Wisconsin, where they reside today. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors past and present as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. So tonight, we're celebrating the opening of Across Shared Waters, contemporary artists in dialogue with Tibetan art from the Jack Shear Collection, a dynamic exhibition presenting works by contemporary artists of Himalayan heritage alongside traditional Tibetan Buddhist ruled paintings or thangka from the Jack Shear Collection. This juxtaposition highlights the diversity of Tibetan artistic expression and fosters greater understanding and appreciation of Himalayan histories and identities. Created between the 18th and 20th centuries, the traditional thangka feature elaborate depictions of Buddhist narratives, deities, and practices. Some works would be used by initiates to support advanced meditation techniques, while others depict deities who aid Buddhist practitioners with everyday concerns, granting blessings of wealth, long life, protection, or healing. The thangka are displayed in conversation with contemporary works by featured artists based around the world, including Marie-Dolma Chophel, who's here tonight, Daedron Nyama-Droma, Gonkar Gyatso, Tenzin Norbu Lama, Kaesong Lemdark, Tashi Norbu, I don't want to lose my place, Karma Punsak, Pema Ranzan, Rebkar Kohlraab, and Palden Weinreb, who's also here tonight. What an honor to have you both. Thank you for being here, and thank you for having your work included in the show. Exploring themes of identity, consumerism, place, and cultural expectations, the artists employ a diverse range of media, from ground mineral pigments to acrylic paint, digital photography, and mixed media works, and resin cast sculptures. Now we have a lot to celebrate and a lot to thank, so stick with me. The traditional works in Across Shared Waters are part of a generous gift made by Jack Shear to be shared among the art museums of Williams, Skidmore, and Vassar colleges and used for education, research, and informed display. I'm so pleased to be able to say thank you to Jack, who's with us tonight. For your generosity and visionary approach to making this gift across the three colleges and multiplying the impact by fostering collaboration among the three campus art museums. I'm also so very grateful to my colleague Ian Barry from the Tang Teaching Museum at Skidmore for bringing Williams and WICMA into this partnership, and to Bart Thurber, director of the Francis Lehman Loeb Art Center at Vassar College. We feel incredibly lucky to be part of this shared cohort and look forward to many collaborations ahead. So thank you all, and thank your teams. This exhibition has also been made possible through generous loans from artists, as well as the Shelley and Donald Rubin Private Collection, the Pitt Rivers Museum, the Michael C. Carlos Museum, and Faith Stone. We are deeply grateful to these lenders. The exhibition was organized by guest curator Ariana Maki. This is so fun! Celebrate everybody. The associate director of the University of Virginia Tibet Center and Bhutan Initiative. With a stellar curatorial team here at WICMA, Elizabeth Gallerani, curator of Mellon Academic Programs, and Nicholas Liu, Mellon Curatorial Fellow and Grad Art Class of 24, along with research support from curatorial intern Priya Rajbandari, class of 25. Thank you all. We're grateful to Rango Lujel, who translated all the texts for the exhibition. This is our first time having a bilingual exhibition in Tibetan and English, and we're extremely excited about that. Lujel translated the text for the exhibition and the brochure into Tibetan. I also want to take a moment just to pause and recognize and extend my truly heartfelt thanks and appreciation to all of the WICMA staff from every department who contributed in countless ways to make this project possible. It has been an extraordinary team effort, and I'm so grateful for it. Quickly, I want to be sure to highlight a rich array of programs to accompany the exhibition organized in the partnership, and I hope that you'll come back for some of them, with a variety of individuals and groups, including Asia, the Asian American Students in Action group here at Williams, George Dreyfus, Professor of Religion, also here at Williams, Tashi Chodron, Himalayan Programs and Communities Ambassador at the Rubin Museum of Art, and Lama Tashi Norbu, an independent Tibetan-born contemporary artist based in the Netherlands. You can find more details about all of these programs and upcoming events on our website, so please do check that out and come back frequently. We're so lucky to have Ariana Maki, guest curator of the exhibition, here with us tonight to lead a conversation exploring themes connected to the show with two featured artists, Palden Weinreb and Marie-Dolma Chophel, visiting us from New York City. It's truly exciting and a wonderful honor to have Palden and Marie-Dolma with us here this evening again, and Ariana will introduce both artists, but first I want to welcome and introduce Ariana. Ariana Maki earned her Ph.D. in Buddhist and Himalayan art history, which is the core of her teaching and research. Ariana is particularly interested in the intersections of art, text, and lived practices. She's Associate Director of the University of Virginia's Tibet Center and Bhutan Initiative, where her work includes digital humanities projects, cultural preservation initiatives, and working closely with Tibetan and Himalayan populations. She worked with the National Museum of Bhutan from 2009 to 2011 and has maintained an ongoing affiliation with Bhutan's National Library and Archive since 2012. Ariana served as the U.S. Fulbright Scholar to Bhutan in 2019-2020. So you can see how fortunate we are to be working with Ariana. So now I'm going to turn things over to you, Ariana, and let you introduce Palden and Marie-Dolma.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me, can I just say one thing? Sorry.
Yeah.
No, sorry. I'm Jack Shear. What I just want to tell you is what's amazing about teaching museums, including Vassar, Williams, and Skidmore, is that there's a constant turnover of intellectual ideas that happen within a college setting that you don't get with traditional museums. And to me, that's one of the reasons why I actually separated this collection of about 75 works. Oh, well, actually, Ariana actually separated the 75 works to have 25 works for each of the institutions so that the student body could actually access them in a really meaningful way. To me, that's really important, that's all. I mean, I didn't hear that, so I just wanted to tell you that teaching museums are really important to my heart, because I think when I was growing up, I didn't go to college. Sort of went to college, but didn't. You know, it was the 70s, whatever. And but museums and college museums were really important to me to see. To see exhibitions that I would never see. I had a college museum just a mile away from where I lived, and I could go and see amazing works that you could never see anywhere else. And that kind of juxtaposition and that kind of access to material is so important on so many levels. And I just hope that college museums really bring in students and people that might not ever want to go to a museum like the Met Museum or the Museum of Modern Art, but it's a local museum, and some kids said, oh, instead of we going skiing this weekend, can we go to a museum? I just want to say thank you all for being here, and it's an honor for me to be able to present this collection to these three institutions.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Pam, for that generous introduction. I'd like to second the thanks to the WICMA team, who've been absolutely phenomenal in our time together. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to give a brief introduction to the artists, and then an introduction to the show and why they immediately came to mind about with whom would I like to have a conversation tonight. So Marie-Dolma Chophel's work features atmospheric depictions of landscapes and cosmic territories, exploring the tension between chaos and control, the expression of natural forces, and the weight of their sensorial impact. Marie-Dolma graduated with her MFA from the École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts de Paris in France. Her work has been shown internationally and throughout the United States in museums, art galleries, and centers. And Marie-Dolma's work is part of the Shelley and Donald Rubin Private Collection, and she was an honorary member of the Rubin Museum of Art in 2019. Born and raised in France, Marie-Dolma has been living and working in Brooklyn for the last 10 years. Palden Weinreb was born in 1982 in New York, where he currently lives and works. His multimedia sculptures and precisely rendered drawings follow his search for elusive, transcendental phenomena surrounding modern life, which approaches a conceptual or spiritual existence, including the afterlife. He draws on Buddhist motifs and ideas while working in repetitive approach, guided by a minimal aesthetic. Many of his artworks are an invitation from look where there is a seeming void between lines, forms, light, and darkness. Palden's work is also part of the Shelley and Donald Rubin Private Collection and has been exhibited at the Rubin Museum of Art, Aza Society New York, Aza Society Texas Center, Queens Museum, and the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. Welcome.
Thank you.
When I was putting together this exhibition, I was actually thinking exactly along the lines of what Jack was sharing. Many people in the local communities for each of the three recipient colleges don't have a lot of knowledge or experience, perhaps, with Tibetan art and material culture. So for this exhibition here at WICMA, I thought of 4 major themes that might act as stepping stones or springboards for teachers, students, and the community to begin to approach an understanding of traditional Tibetan art. So the first theme is origins and inspiration. These are, that is the first one in my head, but the one on the screen is that of lineage and identity. And lineage is important in Tibetan Buddhism because that is the way that a particular practitioner will be able to confirm and feel confident that their lineage is valid, it's authentic. You can trace your teacher, their teacher, their teacher through generations, and that carries with it a feeling of confidence in the tradition and its importance. Usually, though, images like this, they celebrate the highest elites. They celebrate those who achieved a certain level of renown in society. In contemporary times, Tibetans are able to take the lens or take the brush themselves and present themselves to the world in ways that they wish to be seen and encountered. So for example, Nema Droma's series of photographs that you saw up in the galleries hanging above in her self-portrait on the wall are also at the same time not just saying, here is how I wish to present myself, but also challenging our expectations about what Tibetan life looks like today. A second theme is that of esoteric and secret traditions, which are part of Tibetan Buddhism writ large. many times these are among the most misunderstood images in Tibetan Buddhism. For example, when Jesuit missionaries encountered images similar to this, they had a very Christian Eurocentric perspective and drew a lot of misinformed conclusions that caused a lot of misunderstanding as they communicated back home as to what they were seeing. And these mischaracterizations, born out of cultural ignorance and cultural confusion, created a lot of difficulties and contributed much to the outside non-Tibetan understanding of what Tibetans looked like and what Tibetans did. At the same time, as opportunities have expanded in the last 50 plus years for Tibetans to live and work and study and travel outside of Tibetan areas of China, they are also experiencing cultural disconnect. So when Kesang Lamdark encountered Gene Simmons and his famously long tongue, which he loves to show to audiences, the first thing that came to his mind was the deity Dorji Drakten, where the emergence of his tongue tends to symbolize that the deity has taken up residence inside a human oracle who will then communicate salient and important prophecies to those who are surrounded in the listening audience. So these two themes are among the four that neither artist's work came to mind, but I wanted to give you this as the overview of the exhibition. What came to mind when I was thinking about origins and innovation, which is the third theme, is how the form of the Buddha has constituted much of Buddhist art to date. Wherever you go into a Buddhist culture, you will always find a Buddha, and what makes it so adaptable as a religion is its ability to absorb from the new lands into which it has come. So a Buddha will look different depending on where it lands. Usually with traditional depictions of the Buddha, they are surrounded by narrative, they're surrounded by students, they are surrounded with the activities that they brought into the world. And ever since I first saw Palden's work back in 2015, this spiral Buddha, it continually draws me in. If you didn't spend time with it in the gallery during the reception or before then, this is the first piece that you should go to after we talk. Because what it does is it brings in this ability for our minds to challenge ourselves, how we're seeing space, how do we understand the process, how three-dimensionality can really be captured in a two-dimensional surface. And similarly, as soon as I thought about these themes, the fourth theme was that of elements in space. And I knew that I wanted to include this mandala in it. In Tibetan Buddhist use, a mandala is a meditational diagram full of symbols and colors, each of which is associated with a particular realization or avenue for cultivating knowledge or overcoming obstacles. They can come in countless formations, but they're essentially a tool to assist an initiated practitioner in their practice until a certain point where such supports are not necessary. Because of the interplay of a mandala with the natural world, with elements, with this sort of being present in one's body but also outside of one's body, Marie-Dolma immediately came to mind. Her work also calls on us to think about the relationships of the external world and the internal world and the generation of landscapes and cosmic landscapes that can allow our minds to experience something outside of our body just through looking at her work. So I'd like to invite both artists now to introduce themselves. I'll show some of your objects respectively during the conversation. And Palden, would you mind going first?
Sure. First I want to thank Ariana for curating, and Pam and Wicma, Jack Shear, of course, which none of this would have happened otherwise. I think it's really exciting. I haven't been in the Northeast for a while, not since I went to Skidmore, not some time back, but it's good to be back. I was really happy you picked the piece for the exhibition, especially in the context of the section of origins I don't make so many pieces that are necessarily referencing Tibetan iconography, but I'm pretty particular about when I do. And I think this is a really good marriage of it. You can really see the context of it amongst the Thangka painting. Sometimes it's shown amongst other contemporary art, so maybe the idea is lost. And it's, how should I start? I mean, I guess it's kind of indicative of most of my work, which is abstract and generally the 2D stuff. And it kind of probably is in the same sense where it's any sense of representation is kind of inviting this ambiguity of presence. So the aesthetic of my work are these densely filled line drawings, which simultaneously kind of construct form, spaces, movement, but also maintain the minimalist aesthetic that they're just lines in themselves. So at the same time, you're seeing what's created, but also seeing how it's made. So I'm hoping that, as people have this dialogue where they're kind of going back and forth between what's it supposed to be, what's it made of, they can necessarily apply that to most representation in life, which I think is kind of an allegory or an analogous of some of the Buddhist teachings, which are essentially how representation, the life we live, is relatively temporary. It's fleeting. It's so oftentimes society gets so manipulated, or we get so wrapped up in the things that we see, that we lose track of that it's all a relative facade, and I guess within the Buddhist perspective of existence. And in general, that's my approach for my 2D drawings, just having this ambiguity of presence and this illusionary aspect. This piece is an endless knot. It's a reference to it as well too. But also, I like having more of a universal read because obviously there's a lot of motifs that overlap between different religions. I mean, the endless knot isn't necessarily Buddhist, but for me, for someone that deals with abstract forms and trying to maintain the simplicity to them, I think it worked pretty well. But I want to create this, especially with this piece. Again, you have to see them in person, but I'm really glad you have the piece here because you can really get drawn into the meditative nature of how the drawings are made. Because as you see one line, you see more lines, you kind of can't keep your focus. And I think that alone creates kind of a sublime kind of an ethereal effect, where you're kind of drawn into it, and that's all you can really hope for. When making any type of art, we want the viewer to be drawn into it and kind of question, what is it? Maybe question more things than that.
That's lovely. And Marie-Dolma, I'm wondering if I could ask you to speak a bit about your work in general.
Yes, sure. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Ariana. Yes, I think the good starting point would be to start with the painting that is in the show. Because it's pretty representative of my whole work, body of work actually. So generally what I have in mind when I start working specifically with painting is not really constructed, it's pretty intuitive, because my goal is to actually go through a journey and have an immersive experience myself, to be able to in the end also get a work that could give this immediate immersion in the work to the viewer. So generally what I use is oil paint mostly, but also different other mediums such as enamel, acrylics, depending on what I want to render. But anyway, it's a multi-layered work, so it's not really visible on picture, sadly. But yeah, it's a slow process with multiple layers. I tend to build the image as I work. It's really not from preparatory sketches or anything like this. So in the end, it's also a meditative experience for myself. But then I feel like it's also providing then something quite sincere, maybe make it easier for also a viewer to get into the work, because there is this movement of jumping in the image. So that's what I'm really looking for when I work. And then it's much about trying to set a space for a slower time, because everything is going so fast these days, and I feel like art and painting specifically can really give back time to space, inversely. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to convey with my work, mostly.
I think that's true with both of your work. You're slowing down, you're taking the time, like the ability to have the patience to have one layer dry before you can manipulate it or know when. You said you make some of your own tools to adjust the surface. And then in Palden, you know, to have the control to vary not to vary the intensity of the stroke of the graphite, and making sure that everything is being applied in the right way, I think has a lot of meditative quality to it. Just the control. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think both the works can be objects of meditation.
Right.
In the sense where I guess for me it's the specific mark, but for Marie it's the atmosphere.
Yeah, and also I think it's like what you were mentioning earlier about the sense of scale that is somehow like blurred, or you know, it's difficult to identify have a sense of scale. So I think that's something common actually in both of our works.
Although this looks pretty good, pretty big as well.
Maybe I should make one bigger.
Well, something you said was, you used the phrase ambiguity of presence. And I think that also applies to both of your work, because when you're saying it's an ambiguous presence, many times, you know, here, Marie-Dolma, you mentioned that there's a suggestion of a mountain and a lake and creating a general space. And then with some of Palden's other works, there's also this ambiguity of presence of where are we, at which end sort of are we looking through or looking at. And so being able to play with the viewer's experience of where we put ourselves. Are we putting ourselves in the creative process? Are we putting ourselves into the playground that you provide us through your work, where we can just explore and restructure our reality while still remaining rooted in ourselves? I see that commonality with both of the works. And I was wondering, is there anything that the role of the physical natural environment plays in your works?
Well, I know for me, it's more particularly with my sculpture. I think there's a certain power to scale. I mean, I think visually, if you're looking upwards towards a piece, or down within it, or if you feel encompassed by it, if you feel minimized by it, then you kind of, I guess you have to take it a little more seriously, but I use it as a way to kind of allude to a different realm, you know. Like I think if you can scroll to the other piece, Offering Bowls does a great job. I think this is a great piece too, but not to pat myself.
It is great.
But generally speaking, Offering Bowls is to sit within in the palm of your hand. But you know, but a lot of the ideas and the deities that are referred to are massive. They're incomprehensible. You know, so to offer them something that's on a human scale is fine. I mean, but it's something that we can relate to. So I thought to transform that into something that was much grander, or kind of heighten that experience, and make people think what the object is used for, or what I guess the realm that's associated within it. And these pedestals are specifically designed just to cover within. So as you're looking within one, you can look within the other, and they really surround you. And I have other pieces too that you can walk into, or you look up. But also kind of the idea of just looking up is kind of awe-inspiring. Like I guess the association with looking at the stars, looking at the sky, looking at the tall buildings. I guess physically you feel like you should respect it. It instills a sense of awe, and you just kind of question things differently.
And Marie-Dolma, for you, nature, what role does nature in the physical environment play?
Yeah, that's a good question, because like it's kind of separate from my working process, really. So I guess it's things that I gather from, you know, my memory, my own experience, through observation of nature, but then the moment in the studio is, you know, something completely different. And since I'm developing work that's such like an abstracted nature, it's I guess it's something that I just like summon from, you know, memories and experiences. But then I'm still in front of a flat surface.
Exactly. Well, when when I saw your series, Biology of Space,
Yes.
I mean, every single one you can just swim into, because you can imagine it's ocean, it's land, it's, the froth of a wave, which is a different sense than you get with a tranquil ocean. And to me, it was capturing so much of the natural world, but then it's not our world. They're only these small petri dishes.
They're pretty small. They're pretty small, it was an installation, so a series of 8 or 10, I think, pieces like this. And so they were not displayed this way. They were randomly placed on the wall. And what I liked about it is I used these glass petri dishes that, of course, you find in labs and to grow bacterial or viral elements. And so I thought it was interesting because I was pouring the acrylic paint and making these shapes. And so it's where the micro and the macro world are meeting, because in the end you have this circular shape, and it's from afar it looks also like a planet. So it was a way to connect the micro and the macro. It's like how these patterns in the cosmos, whether it's from the atom to the galaxies, are the same in the end, structurally. So.
Exactly. I'm wondering if each of you has sort of shifted from the media where you started. You started primarily with graphite, then graphite, and then caustic, and then into your sculptural work. And then you've also been doing installation work more recently. And I'm wondering if each of you can talk about what avenues are opened up for you creatively as you're shifting into new modes of expression, new media.
Sure. So I've always been interested in sculpture, but I actually wasn't formally trained in it. And but I wanted to challenge myself, and just express some curiosity. Actually, there's a piece. Do you have the Pecha piece?
I do.
I think maybe this was an exhibition where I was invited to make reference from Pecha. Pecha is like a Tibetan scripture, and it's a really fascinating format because it's this long form scale of paper that just have these two bonding boxes, and they're not bound by any means. They're individually separated, but kind of bound by some rope. And you kind of flip it open and then turn page to page. And I was interested to be challenged that because I love the form of it. It's so relatively esoteric. I mean, as far as the Western perspective, and I wanted to give it a more contemporary aesthetic where it could be re-envisioned as more symbolic of the meaning. Where obviously, it withholds all this wisdom and enlightenment. So the use of, and also I guess there's a temporal nature because I use the wax as well too, where I kind of wanted to feel the sense that it was. That it was sealed and it was just a little more mysterious. But the illuminated the pages are maybe plexiglass, and they're kind of showing, I guess, the not to be too on the nose, but the idea of enlightenment with a little light and LEDs.
From the scripture.
Right, but the idea of using LEDs in a reference to Tibetan scripture was something that I was really curious about because that aesthetic had never been seen by me, at least. But as I was pursuing more mediums within sculpture, I wanted to dedicate a different body of work to that. I really wasn't sure what medium to pursue because obviously sculpture is vast. You can choose whatever material you want. It's pretty daunting. So, but I'd been using encaustic in my drawings as well. So I thought that was a natural transition because I felt a relationship to that. I felt a kinship to it in the sense that it's this archaic material. It's kind of withholding things. It's sealing in, and there's a sense of preservation, and merging that with the contemporary aesthetic of my drawings, kind of this minimal, kind of sterile, was a good jumping off point. So I thought to use that on its own as far as sculpture was the right move to make. But a big part of my drawings was ambiguity of presence, and that was kind of the gist of it. So I had difficulty kind of reconciling that because unfortunately, I mean, like an image can be there or not there, it's kind of questionable. But a sculpture is there. It's not there. So I had to make the shift for ambiguity of purpose. So that's when I went to more. I draw from like Tibetan motifs and objects, but I try and reduce them to their kind of bare form. Generally speaking, traditional Tibetan work is very ornate, colorful, but that's not really my aesthetic. So I think reducing that and kind of displacing it into a more minimal and, to me, at least more contemporary setting, was a way of re-envisioning it or re-investigating it. So that's the same thing with the offering bowls and the stupa and the pecha. It's, you know, it's kind of questioning the purpose of it. Because I mean, maybe obviously if you have a background within or a knowledge of Tibetan work, then maybe you can make that association. But otherwise, you know, it's rather like something like the obelisk. You know, you're not really sure of the purpose. But there is a sense of you know, wonder and enlightenment that I think is like beholden to kind of Buddhism in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, the use of light as like reference to light.
And
But can I, just because I was wondering if you were navigating between you know 2D and 3D, if it was something you were doing at different moments, or if you were working on these pretty much at the same time, or
Yeah, I mean, I like to go back and forth. I like to keep it interesting. Usually, if I'm bored of doing compositions, if I drawing, then maybe I'll be more geared towards sculpture. And I mean, I think I'm working on this new body work where it could really be pushed both ways. You know, it could be like a 2D, like a wall sculpture. It could be a full 3-dimensional sculpture. But sculptures do take a lot longer. So usually, it's a different way of thinking. So I try to balance the two, but I guess, yeah, I'll take a break from when I work together, because otherwise, and also, my drawings are really immaculate, and the studio has to be really clean, and my sculptures are just messy.
there's different.
The trash is the studio. Yeah, so I have to clean it for that. That's the question.
And so how about you, Marie-Dolma? Do you work between video and at a certain time, or do you focus on one, or is it simultaneous?
It's not simultaneous. Generally, yeah, I mean, my main medium is still painting. That's also taking a lot of time. So then I guess it's just when I work on an installation or a video, it's one project, and it's also a very different way of working for me, because as I was saying earlier, for painting I don't work from preparatory sketches or anything. So for a video, I need to have my concepts and all the steps ready in the storyboard, and to know what I want as a result from the start. I mean, before I start, actually. So, so that's such a different process. I can't really work all of them at the same time. It's so it's more like one after the other.
And you currently have a piece, both of you. So the offerings is on view at the Rubin Museum right now.
Oh, and the stupa too.
And the stupa, that's why I couldn't get it. And then Resilience is at BAMFA in Berkeley.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah. So
until this summer. So yeah, go see it.
Exactly. So we have just a few minutes before before opening up for Q&A, and I was interested to speak a little, or hear from you a little bit about what sort of experiences would you hope that viewers have? What would you hope that a viewer would take away from your piece?
Well, anything really.
Yeah.
I mean,
Agreed.
the worst thing that can happen is that they just walk right by.
Yes, exactly. Not even noticing, that would be the worst.
Right. I mean, you just want to be engaging, which is, I mean, because not everyone is trained to view art or to make art. So to capture someone's attention that works in different fields or has a different background is really something. And like you know, it's great to have a purpose and a certain read that and a certain effect. But you know, I like to keep my work relatively open-ended. You know, where there's no wrong way to look at it. And again, it's out there. So at this point, it's just for them to make the decision.
Yeah, it's not yours anymore. At some point, it's out of the studio.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. But I mean, hey, I walk by art all the time, but that doesn't engage me.
What are some of the questions that people will ask you the most about your work?
What does it represent? I guess that's often, because I guess it's a pretty abstract, most of my work, but people get a sense that it is landscape, referring to landscape. So I think a lot of people like to have a sense of what is happening in this painting, what is happening to this landscape, where is it, things like that. I think the idea of locating is very present often.
Yeah.
I don't know about you.
I mean, there's lots of context, and I think you got great questions, great topics, and it's been a really fun dialogue. But usually within certain exhibitions or contexts, ethnographics could come into play, and which is always a little delicate. Any artist of ethnicity is kind of tricky about how they want to be portrayed. But at the end of the day, like, we are who we are, and I think it's human nature to want to categorize. It's the first way to understand something. So it can't be fault to it. I mean, I think we both want to be known for our art, not who we are. But we can't control how people want to look at us.
Well, fortunately, you are as lovely as your art, and we are enjoying getting to experience you and your personalities and your incredible creative output. I'm wondering, would you be comfortable if we open it up for some questions from those in attendance here?
I'm going to bring a microphone so that we can record for our video recording.
Oh, no. I actually don't need a microphone. I just wondered if the juxtaposition of your works with the older Tibetan works, how that resonated with you in terms of how you saw your work in relationship to the older Tibetan Thangkas. Is that a good question?
Yes,
That's great, yeah.
Okay.
I see lots of people nodding behind you.
Well, it's I start.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because actually, when Ariana contacted me, she sent me first an image of the mandala that she was imagining like close to my work, and so I thought about which one of my work would actually work with that, and then I had this painting that was pretty recent, just actually hanged in my studio, and I was like, yes, this is it. It's like this inner dialogue. That's the title of my painting, and so for this painting I used really the same color codes, from the elements, and that was anyway this idea of like something that is like emancipating, from its center, and growing and expanding, and so. Yeah, from this like, mountainous piece of land sitting above water, I was playing with these like elements, and thinking of it as also some kind of inner landscape, inner cartography, and I think in that way it's really well connected with the mandala and what it's.
But that's what a mandala is, right?
Exactly. So yeah, it was pretty easy actually to choose this piece.
And when she wrote the email back saying, yes, I have something, her words were so gorgeous, the way she described it. I just said, I'm not even writing a label. I'm using her words
that's the
as
label.
the label because it was so spot on. But Palden, please.
So I think it's great. I think Ariana did a particularly good job because I think that it does require a bit of like finesse. I think it has to be the right type of context because especially with my work, I mean, if it's just abstract, it can be rather jarring. So there needs to be a connection and explain. But I think there's a nice correlation because we are next generation of Tibetan artists, and I think it's nice to be representative of that we can share that connection, but also not be so identifiable within the motifs that we use. Right. And making that association. Also, I think within the community too, it's nice to know that you're not beholden to a certain type of aesthetic.
Any question? We probably have time for 2 more. Jack's gonna go if no one else. Oh, we got one.
Oh, nice.
Jack, you get the next one.
Off the hook.
It was the threat. Could you, Marie-Dolma, could you describe your process? Do you do sanding, or I felt like there was flame?
Yes, I actually do sanding. Yeah, that's a process I developed. I developed. It took a while, but during COVID, I got a bit stressed out, I guess, like a lot of us. And I was really getting tired of not being able to finish a painting. And I went off my rooftop and starting to sand this painting I had spent so much time on. And the result was very interesting. And so from there I started to actually using this process of excavation. So it's, yeah, I do layer many layers of oil paint. I try to define already, you know, some like movement, getting an idea, a sense of the composition. And then eventually I sand, I add layers, and I sand again. And so, yeah, until it works.
And could you explain a bit about the tools that you've developed and the results that they have on the canvas and when you decide to employ them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of like spalters, and I don't even have a name for these, but I scratch. Yeah, so I spalters. I try to get this little like bubbly effects. So then, once it's gonna dry or half dry, I can move the painting around and add some other layers, transparencies, and then sand is gonna fill the little holes that were in the under layer. So yeah, it's a lot of fun actually.
Thank you folks so much for being here. This is a question for both artists. You both play so much with color, but especially with light. I was wondering, you know, your works here are installed in a museum gallery on a flat wall with a very particular kind of spotlight upon them. If you had your choice, how would you want the works lit, and in what space would you want someone to encounter them?
Wow, that's it's a very technical question. Good question.
Well, I know for me, with works that I have illumination within them,
Right.
the darker the better. I mean, it's dramatic, but I know with public institutions, there's safety at play, so you don't want to trip over them or anything. But yeah, I think there's a heightened drama when the work within the piece can be the only light in the space.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. For your work, actually,
that piece
it's
is
more
illuminated from the inside.
Mm.
This is based off of a Tibetan hanging brocade. It's found in most Tibetan monasteries. It's generally pretty ornate and colorful, but built inside of Kevlar, and it's kind of re-envisioned its purpose, where it's you know, it's called an empty host. So it's kind of this being where it's encompassing. It's part of a series where they get smaller and they grow up. And you're supposed to, at this one you're invited to walk into it, and there's actually like a light piece inside that's supposed to, obviously looking up, and it's kind of entrancing. Yeah, so I guess this avoids the whole lighting situation, because it creates its own space.
No, for painting, I would say that I don't know how to answer really to that, because I'm clearly no expert. What I can see, it's when it's changing the colors, like with it, you know, from like when I actually was in the studio, and I can see, oh, that's really too cold or greenish, and generally that's the worst. It's better if it's a little warmer, for my work at least, because it's very colorful. But I generally trust the people who work on this. Yeah.
No hot spots.
Yeah, yeah, no hot spots.
Yes.
I think I saw a question. Yeah.
So I do have a question that's maybe a little slightly off art, but more on kind of thinking about displacement and Tibetan identity, what that means to you. And for that, I'm kind of speaking directly to the art exhibition itself, right? These paintings that are 18th century, 16th century, beyond, the way that got here is in itself is a displacement, right? So when I go to Reuben, for example, I feel that kind of confusion in that space, because I have certain sentiment toward the religious images there, but it's an art space. So I have to reframe myself to say, are they sacred? Is always the question I have personally. And I'm kind of wondering along those lines, our people's history, our people's displacement, and thinking about displacement and identity in general, I was wondering if maybe the question is not exactly clear, but I was wondering if how the identity part, whether it's been Tibetan, whether it's been displacement, whether it's been being an immigrant, or all of that plays into your inspirations or the way you make these beautiful art.
Let me think about this.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think, yeah, you're right, because I think the nature of diaspora is that there are so many different stories, and as we're spread throughout the world, I think people have different influences, and especially with different Tibetan artists, ones that were trained in Nepal or India versus ones that were trained in the West. You can almost see the effect in their work. So it's created a diversity, which I think is kind of interesting. Yeah, I guess I mean that. As far as the variation work, it's I mean in some ways too, because there's like for example, I mean I think we're lucky enough to be here because we live in New York, but all the other artists are coming from all over the world, so it's a little difficult to get everybody together for that reason. But I guess it's exhibitions like that can highlight us, all over the world.
So we are at time, but Jack, did you want to add one more question?
I did not.
Okay.
That was a great question, I thought. That last question about the aspects, I think it was actually brought up also at the Vassar about how some of these objects were only for initiates. They were only for people who had to go through an incredible religious experience to get to that point. I understand that. I particularly was attracted to the black tonkas. I think they're, I remember getting the first one that I got, and I went home and I put it up on a wall, and I put candles underneath it to try to replicate what would happen in a monastery, and basically it became a three-dimensional object. I mean, the golden light was flickering in front of me, and these images were unbelievable. I mean, I'm a visual artist, and so the work for me, although it's spiritual and I understand it, even though I look at a lot of work, a lot of religious work, Christian work, I don't identify it as pictorial rather than spiritual or religious. Not spiritual, but religious. I understand that it's spiritual. And so that's one of the strong things about the collection that I put together, I think, is that it has a pictorial, like maybe from a Western view. And one of the things I understood during the Vassar installation was that not all of these things would be seen by everyone, that some of these objects and the how they're presented are anomalies in our culture, because you would have to get to a very exalted high level of being an initiative to the religion in order to see some of these images. And I think you wrote about it really well on the text. So I think it's a problem, and it's also a delight to see world culture in terms of pictorial rather than religious aspects. I'm just happy that students will be able to investigate these works on any level they see them, whether they're religious or whether they're purely visual.
Would any of you like to make a final comment for time?
I just wanted to say, in terms of those images that are generally reserved for initiate use, we aren't giving those initiations, we aren't giving the details of them. We are saying that this is representative of a class, and we're, naming the deity, but we are not giving details that anyone could do anything with. And in all of the times when I am speaking about them, I try and emphasize you need a qualified master to guide you and determine whether or not this is the right practice for the obstacles that you are finding in your Buddhist path. Because it's what makes, to me, Tibetan Buddhist iconography and art so compelling is that there is a Buddhist remedy for all aspects of the human situation and condition. And each of us are unique individuals. And if a person follows a Buddhist path and finds a teacher that really resonates with them, they get to know you almost as if, like, the care and compassion of a parent that wants to help you do better. So they say, okay, Ariana, you have trouble with anger, let's work on that. Here are the practices. But somebody else's might be jealousy or avarice or something like that. And so it truly is such an individual experience that requires not just dedication, but it requires personal connections with learned individuals. And the depth and sophistication of Tibetan Buddhist philosophy and intellectual thought continues to be undervalued in the world. And these images, these traditional images, I believe really provide an opportunity for people to step their toe in the door. Williams is particularly fortunate to have Professor George Dreyfus, who is incredibly well versed in these absolutely sublime intellectual output of an entire Tibetan culture. And so I just get excited when I see these stepping stones available. There's no way that we can encapsulate all of traditional Tibetan Buddhist art. There's no way that we can encapsulate the richness of contemporary expression. And so with this exhibition, we are hoping that people are encountering it and it's drawing us in to find other avenues of exploration that are meaningful to us in our lives. That would be my closing comment.